Every January, thousands of automotive enthusiasts from literally around the globe descend on Kissimmee, Florida for the world's largest collector car auction. Osceola Heritage Park will once again host Mecum Auctions and its record-setting 4,500 vehicles, including some of the finest collections ever to be offered. Hi everyone, I'm Scott Hoke. We invite you to join us now as we take a look at some of Mecum Kissimmee's feature attractions. First up, it's the wide-ranging Gary and Jackie Runyon collection that showcases IndyCar history and then some.
There's hardly anybody that you can talk to across the country that doesn't know about the Indy 500 and understands the significance of the technology that racing has an influence on. And I just fell head over heels over that.
I think Gary has a natural love of Indy cars because he's an Indy guy. He's been here most of his life.
My collection is geared around roadsters mainly. I was primarily interested in real documented cars.
A.J. Foyt may be the most legendary driver to ever drive the Indy 500. He was the first four-time winner of the race. And to have one of his cars that he drove at Indy, a huge factor in this collection. From a driver perspective, from a historic perspective, if you pick two guys that you want to have significant cars in your collection, A.J. Foyt is one. Mario Andretti, also a must-have.
The great thing about the Mario Andretti cars is that this was his introduction to Newman Haas racing. So you had this powerhouse team come together in 1983, and we just happened to have the 1983 car. Mario kept making suggestions to changes, and by the end of the year, the Lola had won 2 races and set them on the path to future success. So Gary really enjoys the front-engined Indy cars, and he's got everything starting from a 1949 into the 1960s. And he decided to branch out a little bit in recent years, and he's also added rear-engine cars to this collection. One of the truly significant cars is the 1966 Lola that Jackie Stewart drove.
It was destined to win and blew a hole in the oil cooler, and sister car to it with Graham Hill driving ended up winning.
Janet Guthrie was amazing. A lot of people don't know she was a pilot, she was a flight instructor, and she became famously the very first woman to qualify and make the race at the Indy 500 in 1977. This car is significant in Janet Guthrie history because it's the last of the cars that she drove at Indy.
Ray Abraham found the car, restored the car. We ran it last year at Raceway Park. We were working towards indoctrinated into the Library of Congress. Besides the Indy cars, I also have a passion for a little bit off the wall collecting. I'd say my collection definitely falls in the category of eclectic.
It's funny that Gary's collection sometimes is a little bit of a microcosm of a Mecum event. You'll go to the auction and I guarantee you will see something that you have never seen before, maybe didn't even know existed. You walk into Gary's shop, much smaller scale, but there's going to be something that you didn't even know was on the planet.
More than anything, it's probably the rarity. I'm looking for stuff that nobody else has got.
Gary has the 6-wheel Dodge pickup truck that's kind of a cross between Hot Wheels and a nightmare that maybe Dr. Frankenstein once had. It has an articulating chassis so that you can raise it and lower it with the air suspension, and it's got front wheels that will remind you of the chariot race in the movie Ben-Hur. I'm sure a lot of people watching this don't know what a fat truck is, and when you see it, you still don't know what a fat truck is. This is an all-purpose, off-road, off-planet kind of a vehicle.
A fat truck, it's a fabulous piece. Like a troop carrier in the back, it holds 2 people in the front and 6 in the rear. It's a single joystick drive, and it's got a 74-horse Cat diesel.
I guess maybe if they ever updated the Moon Rover, this would be the truck that they would want.
I love sharing what I've got with other people, and I love people asking questions. Where does it come from, and how does it drive, and why do you buy that, and what's next? I mean, that's the question I get all the time. But frankly, I enjoyed dealing with Mecum. They've been extremely transparent, and I can't ask for a better group of guys to share this with.
When we come back, the legend of Carroll Shelby lives on, with two of the most outstanding examples of his creations up for grabs at Mecum Kissimmee.
Mecum Auctions, the world's largest collector car auction, returns to Kissimmee, January 7th to the 19th at Osceola Heritage Park. Join us for the fun, fast-paced, high-energy Mecum experience with 4,500 vehicles up for auction. For avid collectors, first-time buyers, and enthusiasts of all ages, there's something for everyone. Bring home your dream car. Register to bid and buy spectator tickets now at Mecum.com.
Welcome back to Mecum's preview of the upcoming Kissimmee 2025 auction. You know, Carroll Shelby made quite a name for himself, first as a racer and then as an automotive designer and entrepreneur. The Shelby legacy will no doubt endure for generations. And of all the cars that old Shell ever built, perhaps none capture his spirit more completely than the Ford GT40 and the Shelby Cobra. Coming up in Kissimmee, Mecum will offer some of the finest examples of each.
In the history of automobile racing, particularly with a U.S. connection, very few cars will hit the legendary status of the Shelby Cobra.
The Shelby Cobra program was amazingly successful. They became GT champions. They won the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And I think he was the right person when Ford turned to Shelby to run their motorsports program. The issue to this car is that Ford wanted to bring the international motorsport of Ford Motor Company to another level. And Fred Kramer, who ran the Ford Motorsports program at that day, reached out to Essex Wire. Essex Wire was the wiring harness manufacturer for Ford in the day. And Ford was Essex Wire's biggest client.
And he wanted to put together a team for Essex Wire to go out and compete in these national and international races.
Essex Wire hired the best mechanics, the best drivers, and went out and literally dominated A production racing.
As a longtime member of the Shelby American Club, CSX 3009 is very familiar to me. That's the Essex Wire Cobra, maybe the crown jewel of all 427 competition Cobras.
SCCA road racing so popular here in the U.S. in the 1960s, where in the A production class, the Essex Wire 427 competition Cobra won the national championship, and then moving into the 1970s, repeated that both in 1973 and 1974, adding to the legend of this car.
It won a lot of races. It is said it won 60% of the races it competed in.
I personally have all the records to this car. Every race that it raced, this car has more victories than any other Cobra product ever.
Well, Bill, here she is. And I really do feel that we are in the presence of greatness, not just because of what the car itself is based on its rarity, but also what it represents in the legend of motorsports racing.
This car really pushes all our buttons. This is 1966 Mark I Ford GT road car, which was built in December of 1965 and delivered to the first customer on St. Patty's Day, 1966. P1034, one of 31 road cars that were built.
Yeah, from the padded seats to the carpeting to the slightly more accommodating springs for the road, this truly was a track car that was set up so you could enjoy it on the road.
This could be raced, it was raced, but originally when it left the factory, it had things like a non-ventilated leather interior and leather pockets and 2 fuel gauges and an electric clock, things you don't find on a race car.
This pine green color is quite attractive as well. This is an original bodied car, repainted in its original from the factory color.
Yeah, you're basically looking at the car the way it was originally built in terms of color and equipment. Let's also not overlook the fact that this has a very powerful engine, and it certainly has proven itself on a racetrack in the past. The 289 cubic inch Ford small block engine, the legendary engine, was so responsible for Ford's successes back during that time. 48 IDA Weber carburetors, a very intricate induction system on this car, but it delivered 335, 340 horsepower, a 5-speed ZF manual transmission. Many of those Ford GTs back in the day, the race cars, had 4 speeds. This has a 5-speed in it.
1 of 31, that's rarity. But this car also technically is 1 of 1, it being the first road car delivered to a customer. And that customer, I know, has an interesting connection to Carroll Shelby.
The first owner, James Fielding, he was the head man of the company that built the dynamometers that Carroll Shelby used to test the engines in his race cars. And Jackie Stewart was part of the Ford Motor Company goodwill team, you might say, that was present when Mr. Fielding took delivery of this car.
Well, when this car rolls across the block, or even before that, when it's displayed at Mecum Kissimmee in 2025, it's gonna get a lot of attention, and it's our honor to be in this car's presence right now, today. Can't wait to see it go.
What an incredible tribute to Carroll Shelby and his automotive genius. Now, if you're passionate about American classics and hot rods, and who isn't, you don't want to miss these superb collections coming up after the break.
Speed doesn't mean very much in this race.
No, it's endurance.
You got the checkered flag on Sunday afternoon.
Welcome back to our preview of Mecum Kissimmee 2025. You know, for decades, Mecum Auctions has offered some of the finest American classic collector cars. Meantime, Richard Muns and Cliff Ernst have spent much of their adult lives accumulating amazing automobiles. And in Kissimmee, these two worlds collide as these two collectors pass the torch to the next generation of enthusiasts.
Professional baseball has Cooperstown. Professional football has Canton, Ohio. The sport of hot rodding may have its own Hall of Fame here in this unpretentious building in downtown Madison, Wisconsin. Let's take a look right now at the Richard V. Muns collection.
Richard Muns, Madison, Wisconsin, could very well be the ultimate collector. Successful businessman, developed a preference for European exotics. But in the mid-1990s, he turned his business over to his family and took his collection in a different direction. He literally sold all those cars off and went back to his true passion, and that was early Ford V8s, essentially from 1932 to 1940.
There were certain men after World War II that established hot rodding. It was a new art form, if you will, and people like Tommy Foster, as a young man, was bit by the hot rodding bug.
Tommy Foster, interestingly, was a GM engineer. He's building a Ford street rod. But we know that Cadillac came out with their brand new V8 engine in 1949, and by 1953, it had established itself as a kind of a go-to engine for hot rodding. So Tommy went down to his local Cadillac dealership in Detroit and ordered over the counter a brand new 1953 Cadillac 331 cubic inch V8 and used that as literally the heartbeat of his hot rod project.
That light blue paint, that was an unusual color for a hot rod back then. And the fact that it was carried out throughout the entire automobile, again, makes it truly one of a kind.
His specialty were cars that were original, surviving the test of time, and cars that had high accolades in the golden era of hot rodding, which was the 1950s. To be able to offer and show the world what the golden era of hot rodding was, the way it was. Nobody has done it better with the quantity of cars that Richard has.
The RVM Classics collection will certainly bring some rare hot rods to Kissimmee. And for even more American classics, look no further than the Clifferns Collection.
My dad was a great family man from Northeast Ohio. Didn't have the ability to, at that time, to buy cars or anything, so it was more, admiring them from afar. But the passion never waned, and as he continued to proceed through life and proceed through business, he got the means to be able to start acquiring cars. The collection, probably at its largest point, was about 50 cars. They've all been meticulously maintained and taken care of, and that's just kind of how Dad was and how he approached a lot of things.
Clifferns didn't cut corners, did it the right way, and you can see that everywhere you look.
I guess an overarching theme to it, Dad was a fan of V8 engines, so the majority of the collection through the years had V8 engines in them.
1971 Corvette Coupe may be one of my favorites in the entire collection. Here's why. Cliff bought this car brand new as a company car.
It lasted as a company car for less than a year. His accountant came to him and said, probably red two-seater with a 454 in it might not be the best company car, so he suggested Dad buy it.
The 365 horsepower 454 and a 4-speed was maybe a little extreme for a company car, but that's just the way this guy was wired.
71 Corvette is an important car because it was sort of like the farewell Corvette to the high-performance era. After 1971, cars like that, at least Corvettes like that, went into hibernation, you might say.
Perhaps the most storied and mysterious and controversial car of Cliff's entire collection is an incredibly rare 1930 Ruxton.
Probably one of the most talked about cars in the collection because most people have never heard of it.
It wasn't around very long. It was only built for a couple of years. They only built fewer than 100 of them.
It's one of 7 known to exist. The cars are unique enough that they're known by their colors. I think what appealed to Dad in the Ruxton, along with the styling, was again going back to his engineering roots. It was the first production front-wheel drive car. And for the Ruxton, it gave it a unique look by allowing it to sit about 10 inches lower than other roadsters and other cars.
Never seen one before and probably will never see one again.
Dad knew the cars would outlive he and all of us, and the plan was at some point we were going to move them, and we're at that point. And so, I think he would be looking down saying, find a good home for him. The sale will definitely be emotional. I guess the hopes would be that if the owners appreciate them, kind of as much as Dad.
Cliff's legacy as a A-list collector will really come to a head with his collection coming to Mecum Kissimmee 2025. It's going to be one of the main attractions and one of the most exciting segments of the auction, as literally the best examples of this diverse collection are going to be crossing the auction block. I'm just glad I'm going to be there.
When we come back, a collection that was nearly destroyed by Mother Nature. And Mecum Auctions prepares for the biggest event in its history. Stay with us. Welcome back to Mecum's Kissimmee Preview. Mecum Auctions is well known for bringing some of the most famous movie cars to the block. And this year is no exception with the one and only Jaguar, a 1967 Jaguar E-Type Roadster, which starred in all 3 Austin Powers films. Now, let's continue our show with a collection that narrowly avoided disaster at the hands of Mother Nature.
The Tornado Collection. It is a curious name for a car collection, but there's a good reason for that, because many of the cars in this collection were sitting in a building that was struck by a tornado, and through divine intervention or just the magic of the collector car world, they pretty much escaped any serious damage. We are very fortunate to have these cars in this condition after the near miss that they experienced.
The owner of the Tornado Collection I've known for over 35 years. We've done a lot of business buying and selling cars. I've tried for 15 years to get him to sell cars out of his private collection. He would never touch his private collection. And a little over a year ago, his property got struck with a tornado. Didn't really damage anything. That's why we used the name the Tornado Collection. The tornado was the motivator.
The Tornado Collection is over 30 vehicles, all General Motors. That in itself is a bit unique, but even more so is how many years in the making this collection took. It's really a lifelong endeavor by the collector to gather these cars that literally have not been shown to the public in decades. This is going to be a real opportunity for collectors to choose from cars that have not been available before. Certainly one of the stars of the Tornado Collection is the 1959 Chevy Impala convertible. They're rock stars on their own, but this one particular version is at the top of the heap. Factory Rochester Ramjet fuel injection, that's 290 horsepower out of 283 cubic inches, and a 3-speed manual transmission shifted on the column. And you back it up with what arguably is the best color combination available, the black with the red interior. And this is potentially one of the most valuable 1959 Impalas in existence.
I think the one thing that adds to the mystique of the Tornado Collection is how it escaped destruction in the first place and how the owner of this collection has resisted the temptation to sell these cars for so long.
The tornado got these cars to come out of the cocoon. These are cars that were handpicked by a car man.
We'll have innumerable collections at Kissimmee, as we always do, but they don't all have a single owner who has had the cars for as long as they have been in the Tornado Collection.
As the world's largest collector car auction, Mecum Kissimmee, part of the growth and part of the allure of that auction are world-class investment-grade collections. And certainly the Tornado Collection is going to be one group of cars that the bidders are going to be going crazy for.
Mecum Kissimmee will once again be the absolute epicenter of the entire collector car world, January 7th through 19th at Osceola Heritage Park. There are nearly 30 car collections in this lineup, hundreds of unique offerings, including well-known movie cars, vintage European exotics, and classic American muscle, as you would expect at a Mecum event. All of that, along with Steve McQueen's Porsche 917K Hero car from the timeless classic movie Le Mans, means that the stage is set for a spectacular and record-setting event. So be sure to make your plans now to join us in person in January. You will not want to miss the event that kicks off the collector car season. Well, that's all of our time for today. I'm Scott Hoke. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in Kissimmee.